Welcome to our new channel called Mindful Transitions. Um, I want to tell the story of how this actually came to be. I've been an Ipek coach for roughly 5.5 years, which means that I do performance transition leadership coaching. And one of the things I was able to do on my in my second year was I was asked by Ipek if I wanted to contribute to how I'm applying some of the teachings to some of the clients. So I went and did some teleclasses that I found out were used as part of the curriculum. So every once in a while, I get different coaches who have graduated to reach out to me and on LinkedIn, and this is where Ian came from. Ian just he just asked me his I guess one of his niches is that he's working on helping professional athletes transition back into regular life. And we started talking, and it's funny because you look at Ian. He's a handsome white Canadian. Like he's just a really cool guy. And here I'm a Hispanic Canadian here, and we're both Canadians. And wondering, and then also we have at least I don't know 20 plus years difference in us. But yet we started connecting, and I remember telling him a little bit about my experience with professional athletes. And then I said, well, hey, have you ever thought about this whole transition field, right? And he goes, well, yeah. And I go, well, transition, if the only constant in life is change, then that must mean that all of us are in transition in some form or another. And he said, yeah, right. So we came up with this idea. Well, what would happen if we created a channel? And this is where the idea comes on. That's why you got to be careful about ideas, because before you know it, they'll become reality. And today is our first official Mindful Transition channel, YouTube channel. It's our first video, and I just wanted to, before we get started here, I'd like to introduce you to Ian. His name's Ian K, and he's also a certified coach as well, and a core performance dynamics specialist as well. And just wanted to get you guys to get to know Ian. He's a great guy. I love his energy, and I know you will too. So, Ian, welcome to our channel.
Thanks, Walter. Um, and yeah, I it's sort of the same thing for me, right? Like I do really enjoy your energy as well, and sort of just what you bring and what we have together, and sort of how this came together for both of us. So for me, it was really just like a little bit about me was um, did a whole bunch of different jobs, have a pretty wide background in what I've done, and it sort of just came. A lot of stuff sort of happened. I went through sort of like a learning or growing phase, and through that, and through doing all of that, sort of led me to IPEC, and led me to really learning about coaching, and really the support and the help that you can provide people through doing that. And I sort of just fell in love with it, which sort of just led me to here, which led me to doing IPEC, which led me going through the core program, and which led me to actually reaching out and meeting and talking with you, Walter, which led to this channel, which led to us creating Mindful Transitions. And it's been a journey, it's been a ride, and it's been pretty amazing so far, and really looking forward to what we create next and what this turns into.
Great.
So that's a bit about me, but what about you, Walter? Like, what's your story?
Well, you know what? I'll tell you in one sec. I think it's really important for our listeners to understand, because we use IPEC like everybody knows what it is, right? IPEC stands for the Institute of Professional Excellence in Coaching. It's a coaching school, one of the top coaching schools out of New Jersey, New York, that was founded by a gentleman named Bruce Schneider, who has a copyrighted module of called Energy Leadership, and he's also got assessments and a bunch of other tools that we all use. That's really has to do with the idea that there's 7 levels of energy, 7 levels of consciousness, awareness, engagement, and confidence, and that's the foundation for what we actually do. I sometimes explain it like a systematic approach to state of mindfulness, and it's even deeper than that, but that's a layman's term, and that's where the mindful transitions came in. If we could be more present, But as far as myself, I think the story is that I've always been in transition. I got into coaching later on in my career. I became a coach 5.5 years ago or so, and up to that, I was always in one transition or another. I was in sales for 20 years. I've worked with at-risk youth in the past. I've actually even fostered at-risk teenagers in my own home. I did take schooling for substance addiction counseling, so I've been basically experiencing a lot of different transitions in my life. So when it comes to all the transitions, I always tell one of my mentors always said, "Well, Walt, at least that'll make you relatable," which is kind of cool because I'm thinking of somebody that is young enough to actually be my son. But it's interesting that you said to me is that, Walt, I really want to do this because I think I might be able to learn something from you. And I've said to you is that, well, the reason I want to work with you because I really feel that there's something I can learn from you. And I know because the first time we talked, I walked away with something that really was wise. And the fact that the idea that whenever we elevate our level of competition, our competition also elevates. So that was actually fairly profound for me. So I thought, you know what, there's more to this young kid than just good looks and a good set of hair, right? So I really was really excited and looking forward to this. So so I think that from that perspective, I think that we're well yoked in this thing called mindful transitions. And I think that when we were thinking about names, because there's just so many different things that transitions. It can be called change, it can be called transformation. There's a lot of fancy names that coaches call, but the idea that mindfulness is just a state of being in the present moment on purpose and without judging or labeling it, and the fact that really transitions are really just the idea of going from one particular place in your life to another place was something that really resonated with both of us. So I'm pretty excited about that, and I just wanted to know as well, Ian. We talked about our intentions for this channel. I just wanted to get you to share with some of our viewers and listeners what our intentions are. Why did we come up with this channel? What are we trying to do?
Um, Really, like we wanted something that would bring value to the people who listen and watch. We wanted something that would support those people going through transition, going through a change in their life. And we wanted something that people could sort of relate to and take what they're learning and actually it be useful and apply it for themselves. And really have clarity in during transition and know that it's possible to thrive during change and during that process.
And
Um,
that's a really good point because right now a lot of us are going through a lot of transitions with the whole pandemic situation going on. There's a lot of people that are no longer have the jobs to go to. They have kids at home. The world as we know it has shifted, and I think that that's a really good point that you made. Is that even though our lives feel like it's contracting, really in a lot of ways, is that there is the opportunity to thrive during this time. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
yeah, and like that's pretty much exactly it. And along with that, um, there becomes the opportunity for us to see and create different ways to respond to those changes and respond to the transitions that are happening. And to sort of like even take that a little bit deeper, like you sort of said before, change is the only constant.
Yeah.
So if change is our only constant, being able to thrive constantly.
And I think that's really important is to also to understand what a successful transition is. It isn't, right? A successful transition is not an outcome or a line that we cross, right? Successful transitions is learning how to thrive in the process. And I think that being able to define what thriving means for us is also very important because if you don't know what thriving feels like, looks like, um, then how will you ever know if you're thriving?
You won't.
No. So, what kind of transitions, and from your perspective, what are some areas of transitions that people may be experiencing now, or some of the things that you experience in your coaching? What type of transitions are we talking
Um, the first one that comes to mind, like recently, is I was working with someone and they were actually going back to work after being off, and it was really interesting for me because I was just like I always sort of thought one way about it, and I was just like, okay, whatever. But actually being bringing no judgment to it and not bringing my own thoughts to it, and just listening and sort of hearing what the other person was going through, and then looking at really um, the fears they had because they didn't know what they were going back to, and they didn't know what it was going to look like, and like this happened within the last month.
about? Okay.
So just that was like our talk earlier on in the year, and this then the pandemic happened, and that just exploded into like, well, it was literally that. Like, what does it look like now? What am I going to do now? What, like, there's just so many questions, and being able to, like, the big takeaway that I got from it, at least from my side of it, was um, seeing the clarity that they gained by looking at all of those questions and realizing that a lot of their fears they've already dealt with when they were working, was really the big, like, really cool thing, I guess, is the way for me to sort of say it. And sort of seeing her answer her own questions and coming up and seeing the answer for herself.
I think you brought up a good point of uncertainty, and whenever there's any kind of change or transition, it does come with a certain level of uncertainty, and I think that that's something. If you look at different transitions, there's anywhere from one of the niches that you work on is professional athletes going back into the normal workforce, and what that means and the uncertainty that comes with that. But we also have the uncertainty, like you said, right now of people now going back to a workforce that in a work environment that's going to be different than when they left. We also have, and I've heard about this, that a lot of couples now, because they spent enough time with each other, and now realize that they may not want to be with together anymore. And so there's going to be transitions where people are going to make decisions to no longer be married or a couple, and there's going to be transitions as kids go back to school and what that's going to look like. And you think about even the whole sports environment, all the professional athletes going back to possibly playing in front of places without any crowds, and you don't have that home crowd to kind of pump you up, or that away crowd to pump you up, depending on where you are. Think about the transitions of people that are not going to have a job to go back to, and they're now going to have to go into career searching. Think about the transitions of just even different elements like this. I mean, those are just a few of the transitions I can think off the top of my head. Can you think of any other transitions in life that?
Yeah, so a couple that come to me is think of schools. All the kids in university right now. A lot of them, a lot of their classes are on hold. Um, so a lot of the stuff that they had planned out, they all have to make a change. Um, People that are expecting to complete university go into a job. They may not be able to complete it right now. They may not be able to go into that job that they may already have lined up. Um, so those are like a couple that I see there, and also just with the workforce itself, like in general, how many people are working from home? How many people prefer it now? Like I know a lot of people that I've talked to is they're like, I can still do my job from home, I'm happier, I'm more relaxed, I have less stress. And they're just like, well, what's gonna happen when this ends?
Yeah. And I've got a good one, because I know I had a friend of mine that's single, and I know you're single, I believe. And so, anyways, what's that going to mean for dating? Right? What are the ramifications of that in our environment? What's that going to be like, right? And I don't know. Have you given that some thought?
You know what? I haven't thought about that at all.
Yeah, but think about it, right? It's like, what's that going to do to our Tinder generation and our plenty of fish generation, right? There's going to be a transition to that, right? It's the world as we know it has shifted, has changed,
Yeah.
and the way that we're going to interact with it is going to be different as well, right? And the other thing as well too is that there's also a lot of people that whose fitness levels aren't where it used to be when it first just started, right?
I'm one of
So
them.
yeah, so basically transitioning from being a little bit overweight and unhealthy to eating a little bit healthier, because now that we understand that our immune systems are more important than we ever thought they were, right? Because nothing like a pandemic to remind you that our health is really something that we shouldn't be working on. Health, being healthy is something that we should be. It's not something to work on, right? So health and wellness. I mean, there's our health, and there's some people that are now having medical conditions that are getting that have actually gotten worse over the pandemic because they haven't had the access to the hospitals and
Yep.
some of the things that they needed. So some people are dealing with life-threatening illnesses, and that's a transition too, right? And not only is that a transition for the person with those illnesses, it's also a transition for the family around them, right? Where dad used to be the breadwinner, and now dad's in fourth stage cancer or something, right? There's transitions. I mean, the level of transition in our life is all around us. It's everywhere we look. There's a transition going on, right? And I think what's really important is that to understand that there is a way of being mindful through our transitions, and this is interesting. I'd like to get your thoughts on that. We came up with the whole idea of a mindful transition, right? So tell me how when we think about a mindful transition, what are your thoughts in regards to what a mindful transition might be?
Um, so for me, a mindful transition really just, I guess the best way for me to say it is it's being able to sit still and take action at the same time. And it's sort of knowing when to do that. So giving yourself the space, giving yourself the time to sit and sort of look at the situation, look at what's going on. Take into account your emotions, take into account your thoughts, take into account the facts of what's actually in reality, and thinking of how you, like, who do you want to be in with all of that, and how do you want to respond, not how you're going to react. Um, and that's sort of like the easiest, quickest way I can come up with summarizing what the mindful transition and like being mindful about a transition is for me.
And well, I think the way I perceive it as well is it's very similar. But one of the things that even when we think about some of the disciplines that we teach in the core program, the idea of awareness,
Yeah,
conscious acceptance, conscious choice making, trusting the process,
process. Yeah,
right? Being authentic, being present, being fearless, uh, being 100% energetically engaged. I think that when you really think about it, and that's why when we talk about that, sometimes the core could seem like a systematic approach or having like the black belt to being mindful. And we know that mindfulness is a state of being. It's not a religion. It's a state of being. It's a being in the present moment. And one of the things that when I think of a mindful transition is where you are exactly in the moment that you're in, with a full awareness of everything that's happening, but also a deep and profound acceptance of what is. Because that old saying is that pain in life is inevitable, but suffering is an option. And when we, Zachary totally relates to law of suffering, is that when we have non-resistance to the moment where we wish it was like the way it used to be, or hoping that it would be a certain way, that that's sometimes at the root of our suffering, right? And a mindful transition is just really to being able to accept everything that's in the moment. And acceptance doesn't mean that you agree with everything, but it just means that it is what it is. It's a fact, right? If you've got an illness, or if you're a hockey player that your contract hasn't been renewed, right? That's a fact. What's a fact? The fact is of what is actually real, right? Your contract didn't get renewed, right? You have a life-threatening illness. Your wife or your husband no longer wants to be married to you, right? All whatever the facts are is being able to, I think mindfulness, to be able to look at the fact and not resist it or get in denial of it, but really asking yourself, what can I do with this, right? So um
And it's interesting, and something you just sort of said there, it reminded me of something that I heard and I like to sort of say and share is what you resist persists. And it's sort of like when you're putting energy into resisting something, it sort of talks about like you're not accepting something. So you're actually taking away from yourself and taking away from what you're putting energy into something that's not going to happen. Where you
well
could be
here,
putting it into something that does.
and I think you're bang on that point, because what happens is that we've now learned to understand that thinking, horizontal thinking, past or future, it requires energy. And so energy, as we know, cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be shifted or transformed. So that when we go into this horizontal thinking, what we do is we actually have to use up our energy in the present moment to go into the past or to go into the future. And that's all energy that gets taken out of our ability to be present. And that's why I think that mindful transitions is when you can be in the present moment and have all the energy available to you to act and be in the present moment, that increases your ability to be more aware, be more conscious, be more accepting, be more engaged with the action necessary to get through this transition that may be in front of us, right? And so I think that that's really important. And then the other thing I think that's really important as well is that understanding that the roles that we play in our lives, whether we're a hockey player or whether a wife, whether we're a student going back, none of these roles in our lives are truly who we are. It's what we do, right? And who we are is what we bring to that role, right? So when we talk about, and I know from core quite often and from a performance state, is that performance equals potential minus interference. And even as we transition, there's a certain level of performance in our transition, right? Because if the roles that we play is what we do, right? And whatever role we're in, if we're having to shift into another role, right? That shift is the performance, right? And so performance really equals our ability to access our potential, which is our ability to access our skills and talents that we have for that particular role and for that transition, but also our ability to connect to creativity and intuition. And creativity and intuition is just the knowingness that we have, right?
The
So that
unexplainable.
exactly. And when we actually are in that zone, right, we are going to make the most conscious, effective choices that actually serve us and those around us. So that would actually really relate to our level of performance. But if that's all there was, it'd be great. We'd all have these really effective and mindful transition. It'd be great. And there would be no need for me or you or any other transition coach. But because there's a thing called interference. And interference is nothing more than the stress reaction that we have in our lives that are caused by the way we perceive things. Because how we perceive things ends up being our experience of things. And when we talk about stress reactions, there's no such thing as stress. There's only stress reactions, right? So when you consider the effect of stress, it's a good question. How does stress affect us, Ian? When you think about stress reactions, how does that affect us?
Um, just to like to sort of add on to that a little bit, one thing I like to sort of say about like the stress reactions, and it's a lot of people that I talk to relate to it, is like, you know, those buttons or those things that the people really close to you, they know if they say it, you're gonna get upset, but they say it anyways. Those are the things that are those like stress reactions. Um, so to sort of go back, like to continue on with that, is like really it's those moments. It's those moments where we get taken out because of something being said to us or something happens, where we allow the situation or the environment or whatever else it may be to trigger us or press that button where we get sort of taken out of the game, so to speak. And that's really like the way I like to sort of explain that, because it seems like it's pretty relatable. So
Well, what's interesting is that we get taken out of the game. It's interesting that you would use that analogy because I know with athletes, when I work with athletes, is that if they're thinking about somebody who gave them a slash or the coach is not giving them enough ice time, they're going into the past or the future. And when you're in the past or the future, you're not totally in the present moment, so you are taken out of the game. But what's really interesting is that the other thing that also happens, so is that the stress reaction that drives that horizontal thinking manifests itself as tension in our bodies, releases of adrenaline dumps when we get angry. We also have cortisol releases. And I like the idea of cortisol releases. The analogy is like that little zebra in Lauren Green's Wild America, right, or Wild Africa, right? And the idea that you have these zebras and you have the lion that's coming down, all of a sudden she steps on a branch, and that one zebra pops up, right? Just like there's some danger here, right? And you notice that when you see in those movies, when one pops up, all of them start popping up, and before you know it, they take a dash, right? So those cortisol releases is that feeling like somehow the other foot's going to drop, or they're going to find out we're frauds, and that whole idea of the imposter syndrome and all that kind of stuff comes in with that cortisol release, right?
there's some form of danger.
Yes. And so one of the things that we've discovered is that what affects performance, right, in whatever role you're doing and whatever transition that role is going through, gets affected by our ability to manage the anxiety in our mind, the tension in our bodies, and our level of engagement with what we do and who we do it with. And what we talk about level of engagement, it really talks to really the how emotionally and intellectually we are engaged with what we're doing and who we're doing it with. Okay?
Yeah.
So all that's going to affect our performance, right? And the thing about that is that we've also discovered that it comes from 6 different areas.
Yeah,
And
I think in just with in IPEC we talk about like those 6 areas are, we call them influencers,
yes,
right? So there's emotional. So we can all sort of relate to an emotional response to something, whether it be happy, it could be sad. Like we have, it's part of our emotions. We all have them. There's sometimes physical. So talking about the tension in our bodies. Sometimes like you just feel good for no reason and like you sort of just feel it inside, right? Like that happens. There's social aspects. So sometimes it's taking that time to be by yourself. Sometimes it's, calling up your friends, being like, "Hey, like, it's Friday. We need to go have a drink." Right? Like, there's just different aspects of it, and it's different for each of us. And then the other one is there is mind blank.
No problems. There's the spiritual,
Yep.
loving what you do and who you're doing it with, and also are you being congruent with your values, right? And really, when you think about values or principles that we live by, right? Are you being congruent with your beliefs, the statements that you believe to be true based on past experience? That can all affect the spiritual influencer. The one thing that I thought was interesting that you said about the social, right? The people around you. They say that we're the average of what the top, the five people that we hang around with the most. Are people around you, are they helping you to support you to show up in the highest and best version of yourself, right? Especially when you're going through transition. Any kind of transition, the people around you are going to also affect your effectiveness and how you're going to transition through things, right? Because again, it's like, and it dwells into all this idea of like, do you have people where you have earned the right to hear your vulnerability? Are you getting advice from people that have your best interest in mind? There's so many different elements to that, right? And I love that you said the emotion, because the emotions really, when you think about it, it's about learning how to become aware and manage the storyteller in our heads, right? Because the stories we tell ourselves quite often will affect how we feel and the emotions that we have, right? But also the other way around, right? How we feel can actually drive the story, right? But you wanted to add something? I know something popped up there.
Yeah, so it was just sort of saying it's like those when we think about how like sometimes our feelings drive our thoughts and our thoughts drive our feelings. And a lot of times like those stories that we're telling and creating, it's how we're interpreting them that really influence like is really sort of behind the scenes influencing those things that sometimes we're not aware of.
Well, think about this. I know you probably found this as well. Is when we talk about the discipline of acceptance. What acceptance means to people really has a big effect on how easily or how difficult it is for them to accept things, right? Because I know with a lot of high performers, they don't want to accept losing, right? Because gosh darn it, they're winners, right? So a lot of what we define words in our lives to mean does affect the way that we experience them. Have you found it?
Yeah, I actually had someone say this to me, and I just now use it because it's spot on. He's just like, "Yeah, I don't accept things," and it's like, "Okay, curious, just like tell me why." He's like, "Well, because if I accept it, then I failed," and I was just like, "Huh." I completely understand and see that aspect right now. Yeah, not what I meant when I say like what would accepting it look like. And yeah, go
And,
ahead.
and you're exactly right. I mean, he basically had a definition of acceptance as failure, and so he refused to fail. Does
Yep.
not want to be seen. Does not want to feel like a failure. Doesn't want to think he's a failure. So therefore, acceptance was not something in his vocabulary or something that he wanted to really do. But as we know, from an energetic perspective, whatever we resist, and really what is non-acceptance, but just resistance, right? Whatever we resist persists and expands, because whatever we focus on, we give energy to, and it becomes our reality. So whatever we're resisting, we're going to get more of in our lives, right? And so I think that that's a really good point, and the fact that he had somebody qualified like yourself to walk him through why what he perceived things to me and the filters that he's viewing acceptance through could actually be the very reason why he may feel stuck or is not being as effective in whatever he's endeavoring to achieve, right? And so I think he doesn't he probably didn't fully recognize what a blessing you were in his life to actually be there and to be able to be a witness and also somebody who will be able to support them in looking at life in a different way.
He does. He's very
So,
appreciative.
so the other thing that we also have too, right, is we have the because you talked about the physical, we have the mental influencers, and mental influencers are really a way that our brain functions, right? And when we talk about mental influencers, right, we're really talking about what we focus on, right? How long we focus on it, right? And because the whole idea that we can somehow multitask, right? There's no such thing as multitasking. There's multi-focusing, right? We focus on one thing, we give it a little bit of energy, and then we focus on something else. And so this misnomer that it's funny. We even sometimes go back to old stereotypes. Oh well, we as guys we are multitasking, and we'll even say that, right? That really, when you think about it, there isn't multitasking. There's multi-focusing, and how long we concentrate on what we focus on differs when we got lots of things going on. And transition, because there's so much uncertainty, right? What happens to our ability to focus again?
Well, we split it. Like, because there's so many uncertainty, well, let's say we have 10 things that we need to look at, 10 things we need to work on. So we're just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? And we just keep on sort of splitting. But really, um, really, we're cheating ourselves. So let's say there's 10 different people in our lives, and we're trying to talk to them all at the same time. Well, really, we're talking to one person and cheating the other nine. So it's the same thing when we're in our lives. When we're trying to multitask, we're really only giving a little bit of ourselves to that one task, and we're cheating the rest of it. And often the times what ends up happening is we keep on wondering, like, why does this keep on happening? Why do I keep on getting nothing done? And it's sort of because like you're sort of saying, it's like we can't multitask, we can't multi-focus. If and a question I sort of like to ask is, what would it look like if we just put 100% in to what we're doing in the moment?
Which brings us back to the mindful part of the transition, because the thing about this is that I know that even people listening to us will say, well, yeah, well, I multitask. I think that you can multi-focus with a certain level of concentration, but the word isn't whether you can or you can't. The question is whether can you do it effectively, because in the end, um, it's our level of effectiveness that's going to really make us feel, I like this, feel like we're thriving in the moment, because non-effectiveness makes us feel like we're not thriving. Effectiveness makes us feel like we're thriving. So it's interesting how many of us, because, and I think that has to do with the fact that we've been programmed. And I talk about program not in a negative way, just as is, right? We've been programmed from a young age based on our family upbringing, things we see on television, media, schools. That it's about achievement and accumulation.
Yeah, the
That
teams we're a
if we
part of, the communities we're a part of, they all influence us.
are we if we achieve enough, if we accumulate enough, we'll be enough. Right? And what happens along the way is that there's a lot of transitions to get to that, right? And some of us may never make that transition to where we feel successful, because maybe we've had some inner blocks. And we talk about inner blocks as being like limiting beliefs, assumptions, the filters that we see, even
In-
our little gremlin that'll want us to play small, to outer
Interpretations that
blocks,
we make.
interpretations that we make. Outer blocks, money, where we're born, where we live. Just there's a lot of outer blocks that we may have. Maybe not really being really good at this thing called school because we don't have great rote memory, or we don't have environments at home that were conducive to us really being great students, or We got into the drug experimental years, and we ended up with some kind of an addiction. There's a lot of things along the way that really people can fall off that path of that program that we're given, and then for the rest of their lives feel like they're forcing their lives because they feel like they've missed out.
The
Yeah,
playing catch up.
yeah. And so what we're saying and why we created this channel is to really, really, and again, as people can are listening to us, we've got, as you can tell, just from even this small little talk, that we've got a lot of thoughts on transition. And there's also we have a lot of experience. I mean, I'm no, I'm okay with my age. I'm 54 years old. And how old are you, Ian?
33.
33. So we've got 20 years of experience from when you think about it, 33 plus 54, we got 84 years of experience of being human. We get it. We've all been there, and the one thing that I like about this is that Ian is seeing it from a different perspective than I am. Ian is still single. I've been married for 27 years. I have a special needs boy. I've had a lot of my own life experiences, but he also has his life experiences, and he's been through some difficult times himself, and he's still having to go through the process where he's going to need to, at some point, decide if he wants a life partner, right? And what that's going to look like. And he's also going to need to make some decisions of whether he's going to buy a place in his town or somewhere else, or whether he's going to be a globe traveler and work in different parts. Like there's a lot of decisions a lot of transitions yet left for you. For myself, there's a lot of transitions. From your age, you're probably going to be going to more weddings than I will. I'll probably end up going to more funerals in the next 10 years than you will, right? Just
I,
the
I'm just gonna
nature.
say I hope so. Just
Yeah. So I think that having a nice balance of the two, right? And I think that what's really important too is that we're actually we wanted to provide tools for people. We want people to also feel like they're not alone in this transition, because right now, this social distancing really is a way of separating people. And it's interesting because uh, right now is one of the few times in history where not sick it's not sick people that are being quarantined, it's healthy people that are being quarantined. And one of the things that happens with that is that when we start to lose our patterns, our rituals, the people in our lives, in our work, in our schools that help to form our self-identity, there's a lot of people right now that are kind of really feeling all alone. And I think that with our channel, I really see us as an opportunity to give back, to give tools and insights, and as well, just to get people to get to know us. And there are people out there that have the resources, that have the time, money, and resources that could really benefit from somebody like a coach like yourself to really help them navigate through whatever transition they're going through, whether it's ending professional athletes or what have you, right? Or it could be marriages or what have you. So is that when we talked about this, Ian? Is that our intention? Do you feel that's our intention? Is
yeah, and like yeah, it simply put, yeah, it is. And I think for me, the only thing really to add to that was really the motivation or the drive that we have to help people. And it really comes from a place that we want to be of service to people, and we love making differences in people's lives, and not just like short term. We want these differences to last a lifetime. And when we were sort of talking, that was sort of the underlying thing that came out, is like, okay, like Walt really wants to make a difference for people, and not just today. Like he wants the difference that was made today made a bigger difference 10 years down the road. And like that's sort of something for myself as well, as like any any differences or any changes that we go through now, or that you get help through now not only support you today, but 10 years from now you look back and be like, okay, I'm where I'm at now because of that moment.
Yeah, good point. And I think that that's really important because what we're striving to do, we're looking, we want to equip people. We as IPEC's slogan is raising the world's level of consciousness one person at a time. I think that if our channel here can encourage people to not feel as alone, and or even to seek out coaching, even if it isn't me or you, if it's some other coach. I mean, the thing is that there's thousands of coaches out there, right? What's unique about us is that we know that there's only one Ian and there's only one Walt, and we both play our music a little differently. And for some, I could be a honky tonk guitar, you could be a refined violin, right? People that would like the guitar may prefer, or some people that like guitar and other people prefer the violin. There's a lot of coaches for everybody else, and with ourselves, we are here to tell people that we're all going in the transition, whether we like it or not, and change is the only constant in life. And there's a way of looking at change is that we're either going to feel at the effect of change, or we could become the change that we want to see in our world.
And the one thing I want to add to that is either perspective that we're at or how we're seeing it, it's okay. Like there's it's okay for you to be thriving through it or not. It it doesn't matter.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point because I know sometimes people get really frustrated at being confused, um, or just having to struggle. They feel the struggle. I can't struggle no more. I'm tired of this. Right. And one of the things that we need to remember is that if there was no confusion, we would never reach clarity. If there was no struggle, there would never be victory. Right? That's all part of the process, and that's why getting back full circle to what we're talking about is that transition isn't a line that we cross or an outcome that we reach. Transition is really learning to be mindful and to thrive in the process. And that's what we are trained to do. And this is something that I know both for yourself and myself, it's a profession, it's not just a job. And that if people are interested, we're also willing at this time, because we know that there's a lot of people that are holed up in their homes and may not have anybody to talk to. We're willing to take a half an hour and talk about your journey. And if there's one thing that you're struggling with, within half an hour, we'll give you an insight or a tool or something that can help you go through that. And I know I've offered that, and I know when we talked with you, Ian, you're willing to do that as well.
Yep.
So below this, at the end, there's going to be there's going to be a link that you can reach out to us, and there's absolutely no charge to it. It's our way of paying it back. And also, if you've ever had an idea of what the heck coaching is all about, and even this transition coaching, I know they talk a lot about life coaching, but we're not we're not just life coaches, because you don't need to be certified to be a life coach. We're actually certified performance. We're certified coaches through Ipek, and we have a specific skill. And what that is that we are basically, we understand the way that energy works, and how it relates to our thinking. We understand how energy affects us, and we also understand that we're the most effective and our most authentic self when we can be in the present moment that we're in, and from there be able to move forward with a purpose, with intention, so that we achieve less, we reduce the stress in our lives, and we increase our level of effectiveness in whatever role we find ourselves in.
Yeah, and like you sort of saying before, right? Just with using the same things, like when you talked about performance, really knowing the energy level and being able to navigate that detracts or takes away from the interference that takes away from our performance or from optimally performing in the moment.
Perfect. That's a great way of putting it. Um, and guys, just want to let you know that we one of our also intentions is to have our time here every week, to have it every Friday. We'll most likely, as we start, they're going to be taped, delayed. So we're going to tape them first, videotape, and then put them on. But at some point, we may go live, and we may actually also take some questions from you guys as well. Want to hear your feedbacks on our new channel, some of your thoughts, and we're excited about this. And we know that today we kind of gave you an expanded version, and we just kind of freestyled our some of our thoughts, and just wanted to get your thoughts on it. And if you do like this, share our link with other people that are going through difficult times. And every Friday, we will have a segment for you, and we will hit a particular uh, topic or a type of transition, and we'll flesh it out, and we'll provide insights, tools. There'll be a lot of really helpful things. But like I said, for all of you else that are really curious and want to talk to us directly, you'll be able to book a 30 minute session with us, and you can experience what it would be like to be coached by the incredible Ian K. Right?
Or
And
Walter Aguilar.
right? Or myself. So I thank you for that, and I thank you for taking the time to hear the introduction to our new channel. And Ian, do you have any parting words before we call it a day?
Um, I guess the only thing I really got is just thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and hope to talk to you and hope to see you in the future.